Hey friends, welcome back to the Guitar Max channel, and have you ever seen this guitar before? I dug this out of my storage recently, and I think enough years have passed now where I should really talk about what this is. This very flashy, eye-catching guitar is a prototype guitar from way back when I tried unsuccessfully to start my own guitar brand. Crazy dreams is what I was having back in 2017, 2018. That's kind of where this story begins. I think I'd been watching too many Rob Chapman videos about Chapman guitars, and I was looking at that and thinking, hey, I could do that too. It'll be easy. I'll just find a factory that can manufacture guitars to my specs. I'll come up with a cool design that's a little bit different than what everybody else is doing. I'll have Guitar Max on the headstock, or maybe some other cool name that I was going to think of. And then that'll be it. Overnight success. Boy, was I naive that such a simple plan would be easy. This thing crashed and burned before it even got off the ground. But now, many years later, I think it's worth taking a look back at the design, what I wanted to do with it, and what went wrong with starting my own guitar brand. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the backstory of this guitar, but strangely enough, this video is actually sponsored by an actual great real guitar company, which is of course Vola guitars. And I'm going to get more into this later. I'm going to talk about Vola in more detail as we go through this. But just at the beginning here, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Vola for sponsoring this video. And this is the second video of mine that they've sponsored lately. Now let's look at this guitar, and I still think it looks pretty cool, but as I sit here and I play this thing, I remember the immense frustration I was going through when I was trying to make this happen. So back in 2017, I was really getting into the Gibson guitars, right? The Chinese-made kind of knockoff guitars. And as I was getting more into it and looking at it more closely, I started to realize that these factories over in China, they didn't just have to make knockoff guitars, but you could go to them and ask them to make something specific, and in most cases they would, or they would at least try to. So it was around then that I got this idea. I thought, I know, I can go to a Chinese factory, I can give them the specs I want, tell them to make this guitar, and then I'll import the guitars, and maybe I can make a few minor adjustments of my own, put my name on the headstock, and give them a nice setup, and then I'll sell them, right? So it'll be manufactured in China, but designed and set up in the USA. And a lot of companies do that, so why wouldn't it work? Now, this guitar, for the most part, represents the general specs that I wanted, in that I wanted kind of a super strat type guitar, so a generic strat body shape. I wanted two high output humbuckers, a Floyd Rose style bridge, fairly simple controls, which didn't exactly work out right, and then a 24 fret scalloped fretboard, and of course a reverse headstock, which I loved back then and I still love it. That was what I asked for, and I kind of got it, but it just fell short in so many ways. And I should mention, this is the second prototype. The first one is this other blue one that I have, which is not even playable. This one is at least playable, and I did some work to it myself. I put in different pickups and so forth. So this one plays pretty well, but it still wasn't exactly what I wanted. So where did it go wrong, right? Well, the first problem, which was kind of a minor detail, but it was a pretty big red flag, is that when I got this guitar, shipped to me from the factory, it had no string trees or string retaining bar. And this is like a flat headstock. It's not an angled back headstock. And so with the locking nut here, if you don't have a string retaining bar, or at least like a bunch of string trees to keep the strings at the right angle going through the nut, if you don't have that, which this guitar didn't have originally, then when you lock the nuts down, the clamps down on the nut, it completely goes out of tune because you're changing the angle of the strings from this to like way down here when you lock the clamps down. So I had to add the string retaining bar myself, and that alone is not a big deal, but just the fact that the factory sent it to me that way with a major problem like that, it kind of showed that they really didn't get it. They were willing to send me something which was almost unusable as it was, and they're like, yeah, that's fine, that's what he asked for. Now, the other big problem that I struggled with was the neck profile. This is a fairly full C-shaped neck, and I tried on the first prototype to get a nice thin, like a flat D-shaped neck. Didn't get it on the first one. I tried it again on the second prototype, still didn't get it. This is pretty much the same neck as the first prototype, even though I asked them to make changes to it. The attitude that I was getting from the Chinese factory was basically that my specs were sort of suggestions, and it was kind of up to them as to whether or not they were actually going to follow the things that I was asking for. A similar thing happened with the controls down here. I didn't want two separate volume knobs, even though this has it. I was trying to get a single volume and then a separate tone for each pickup. I at least got the three-way switch. The other thing was the output jack right here. I didn't want it on the front of the body because with a Floyd Rose, the arm can easily hit the cable when it's coming out. And if that happens, it'll start to push on the arm when you don't want it to, and it changes the tuning of the guitar. So I wanted to have it on the outside, and that was another thing I requested, but they just wouldn't do it. And when I asked about it, they kind of ignored me as if, you know, they hadn't heard my initial request. The other thing, and this was a huge red flag, is I wanted a Floyd Rose bridge, and I was really trying to get, at the very minimum, a Floyd Rose Special or a Floyd Rose 1000 series preferably. And they said, yeah, no problem, of course, we'll send you a Floyd Rose bridge. Well, this is a fake Floyd Rose bridge. This is very obviously a knockoff bridge. And I was very clear about it. I'm like, no, I want it to be, you know, a name brand bridge. I understand it'll cost more, but that's really what I want to have on the guitar. And so they said yes, and then they sent me something completely different. So at this point, after the second prototype, I was really starting to get frustrated. But then I saw something really bad that was pretty much the nail in the coffin for this whole thing. When I was going over on the website for the factory, they had all these different lists of like options and models that you could order from them and then customize. And I started to see things on there that were very obviously other companies' products. So what was going on was that factory was making these products, but there was no sense of like company loyalty or brand loyalty. So anybody else could order this other brand's products even with their name on it. So there was not going to be any way to protect the design, right? Even if I got the guitar and my initial idea was to do the branding myself after I imported the guitars, but I could tell that that factory was still perfectly willing to sell the exact guitar that they were sending to me. They were going to sell it to anybody else that wanted it as well. So there was no like exclusivity or protection in the design. And honestly, I shouldn't have been surprised. I mean, that goes along with the whole Chibson concept, right? They're making inexpensive copies of pre-existing designs, and the same thing was going to happen with my design. Now, obviously, other YouTubers and musicians have created their own guitar companies. I mean, Rob Chapman is a big example, of course. Vola is a big example with the solar guitars. He's done that really well. So it's not like it was an impossible idea, right? I think this would have been a really good idea if everything had worked exactly the way I wanted it to. And by the time I figured like, well, if I do this and I do that, and I do a bunch of extra work on the guitars after I bring them in to make them separate from something the factory would sell, I did all these calculations and how much time and money it would take me to really develop these guitars to what I actually wanted. But then at the end of the day, it would still be a Chinese-made guitar, and I didn't think people were going to pay enough money for it to where it would actually be profitable. It ended up being a situation where it would have been a huge amount of work for me, and I probably just would have lost money on it in the end. Okay, so I do want you to hear this guitar some more because, you know, this one guitar, like there's only two of these in existence, a red one and the other blue one, which is really a mess. But this one actually plays pretty well at this point, and it does have a scalloped fretboard, although it's kind of a light scalloping on it, but it makes bending and vibrato really easy and really fun on this guitar. So let's go ahead and get into the demo, but I do need to talk about Vola, right? Because they're doing me a huge favor by sponsoring this video. And of course, the Volas are made in Japan, and they're made to a really high standard. And if anything that experience taught me, It's that I really have to have respect for a company that can make an incredibly well-made instrument and do it consistently, right? Again and again and again, and then do it all with a business model that actually works and makes sense to be successful. So obviously, Vola has done that. They make beautiful guitars, and I've checked out a lot of these guitars. I think I've reviewed 5 or 6 different Vola models over the past 2 or 3 years. So guys, I'm going to have a link down in the video description below. And what that is basically is it'll take you to the Vola website. It'll give you a 5% discount. And if you use my code down there, then I'll get a little kickback as well. But again, guys, the main thing is just go check out the different models from Vola because they make great guitars and they're sponsoring this video. Okay, now let's plug in this old prototype and listen to how it sounds. Okay guys, there we go. So let's talk a little bit more about this. One thing about it is I believe these are the Floyd pickups, which you can find them sometimes on Amazon and so forth, and they make really great, good sounding, but not too expensive like aftermarket pickup sets and everything. The bridge pickup here is really cool because it combines a standard humbucker with the rail pickup, and then there's just a nice fat sounding high output pickup in the neck position. One of my goals was I was trying to get the neck pickup as close to the end of the fretboard as possible. That way it'll get the biggest difference between the two pickup positions possible. I remember 2 or 3 years after I had been working on this guitar, I was talking to the guys from Go DPS Music and Sawtooth, and at the time they had a bunch of models that were made in China. I think they've since changed a lot of the manufacturing, but back then, they were having a lot of the same problems that I was complaining about earlier in the video. Just stuff that they would tell me where the factory would completely change a component or an aspect of the design and not tell them they were doing it. And so they'd get this huge shipment of guitars that would be different in some way than the previous shipment, and they had no warning. They had no idea that it was going to be like that. So it's honestly kind of cathartic making this video because this was something that really frustrated me a lot back in the day when I was working on this. So it's been kind of cool to pull it back out of the case and plug it in and play it a little bit and kind of think back to those times. I mean, that was 7, 8 years ago now when I was really working on this. And obviously a lot of things have changed since then. I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing now, so I don't feel like I missed a big opportunity or anything. I think if anything, I might have just dodged a bullet with this. But this one guitar, the second prototype, still did come out pretty cool. That being said, I think I'm going to pass this on. I don't think I'm going to keep it anymore. I'll probably just end up putting it on eBay. So if somebody wants a you know, an extremely rare prototype guitar that's kind of part of my history, you can check it out on there. I'll probably have a link down there with everything else down in the video description below. Okay guys, so there you go. That was a look back at my attempt from back in the day to start my own guitar brand. What do you think about all that stuff? Let me know down in the comment section below. And have you ever tried to do an idea like that where it seemed like a really good, very straightforward idea at the beginning, then as you got more into it, it was just a nightmare? Let me know your experience, again, down in the comment section below. Okay guys, I'm going to have links for everything I was talking about in the video description. I'll have a link, of course, to the Vola stuff. Please go and check that out, as well as my social media and my online YouTube course, all that stuff down in the video description. Thanks a ton for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon.